Hello, I'm Jim Cameron, the program director of Darien TV 79, and this is a show called Inside Town Hall, where we interview the folks that help run Darien's town government. Stephen Olvaney is our guest today. He is the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we're going to talk to him about the works of that very important body. Steve, good to have you on the program.
Thanks for inviting me, Jim. Appreciate it.
Sure. So before we talk about the commission, let's talk a little bit about your background. How long have you been on P&Z, and how long have you been chairman?
I've been on P&Z for, I'm going to say, 9.5 years, and chairman for the past about 3 years. Prior to being on P&Z, I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I got a nice letter after Jamie Stevenson became first selectman, and she wrote me a letter, said, "Welcome to Zoning Board of Appeals," and I still have it at my house today. It was on really thick paper, and it's kind of cool. Prior to being on Zoning Board of Appeals, I was in the RTM set across the aisle from you. Not meaning the aisle means anything. You always sat on the left side, and I always sat on the right side. And I was on the Planning, Zoning, Housing Committee for, I'm going to say, probably 5 years, somewhere around there. Gene Coyle, if you remember that name, he got me into RTM for years ago.
God bless him.
That's for sure.
And your professional background, you work in commercial real estate, is that right?
Yes. I head up the appraisal division of CBRE in the Stanford office. My territory is all of Fairfield County, Westchester County, and the mid-Hudson Valley or lower Hudson Valley region. Prior to CBRE, I did the same thing at Cushman & Wakefield. They're probably two of the largest commercial real estate companies in the globe. And prior to being up in Stanford, I was in New York City and did similar roles and did investment sales in New York City for years and years. And then moved up here when my first daughter was born, and she's 23 years old now. 22, I think. Yeah.
It's a good number you want to get right.
That's right.
Now, after your name, you have an acronym, MRICS. What does that stand for?
It means member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. It's a professional designation for the achievements that I've accomplished in my years as an appraiser. There's other people that are in that institute that are not appraisers. It's an international recognition item. There's another one that's more United States wide. It's called MAI, which effectively means a member of the Appraisal Institute. They're two similar type of things. A lot of my clients are international. And as soon as they see that, they recognize it. It's a little bit like, it's definitely a different level, but it's a little bit like, Esquire or PhD, or if you look at Jeremy and the professional planners in our office, they have acronyms after their names. That's the designation they got for their industry that they're in.
Now, let's talk about P&Z in general. What is the purpose of the Planning and Zoning Commission?
To me, the purpose is to make sure land use is consistent across our town. I personally believe it's probably one of the most important commission in the town of Darien, absent the Board of Selectmen. The best part about P&Z is that we do not have a budget, so we don't get caught up in any budgetary items, which can be a political nightmare, or it can be politically charged. It's zoning in our town was enacted in 1959. Around the world, or around the country, was acted way back when. I probably couldn't even really give a date, but when they do zoning, and I've done zoning as part of my business, I do it in every single town in Westchester County, every single town in Fairfield County, and I can see how it's similar, but it really controls what happens in municipalities in certain areas. And most towns are very similar. Where there's a commercial district, there's one or two. Then there's outlying districts. If you look in our area, most towns are either built on Route 1, Route 9, a railroad track, a river, a stream. That's just the way it was in years. And the commercial areas were always by the main corridor, either be it the river or be it a road or a rail line. And then the housing and the farms and whatnot go out from there. So we try to keep that. I mean, it was set way before my time. And we just try to keep that in place and make sure it's moving in the right direction with the way the world is moving too.
When you drive on Route 1 and you either go west to Stanford or east into Norwalk, it's very obvious when you go across the town line that you're in a different city.
Yeah.
Why do Stanford and Norwalk look so different from Darien?
That's a hard question, but I can tell you that both of those municipalities are cities. It's the city of Stanford and it's the city of Norwalk. Most people really also don't recognize that on Route 1, the dividing line between Darien and Stanford is a body of water. There's a river that you go over that was actually honestly just replaced. And then when you go from Darien to Norwalk and vice versa, there's also a body of water. There's a little river that runs right there next to 800 Post Road, right before you get to Costco.
Mm-hmm.
And once you cross the river, it's a different municipality, and at different times, you know, those cities which probably started a lot, I know they started a lot early in Darien, they probably grew to their borders. Darien, when Darien started, it grew from the center out to the borders. So that's where the difference is. The one thing I can tell you, I grew up in a town called Garden City on Long Island. When you cross from Mineola or Hempstead or Uniondale into Garden City, which is a planned community, as soon as you cross the border, you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot different. And even I live on Hoyt Street or off of Hoyt Street now. It's funny, they're redoing the roads on Hoyt Street in Stanford. As soon as they get to the town line, the road stops. I mean, the new asphalt stops, and there's a distinct border there. I guess it's always been like that, but I think the best answer is that those other cities grew to their borders, and Darien grew out from its center.
And you know, the fact that there are, you know, going into Norwalk, there are so many large commercial, including big box stores.
Yeah.
Does Darien benefit from having those kind of stores in neighboring towns as opposed to somebody trying to plop a Home Depot down into Darien? Would it be possible for a big box store of some type to come into Darien?
The first question is the answer to your second question is yes. I mean, I do consider supermarkets a big box store. Our Good Wives Super Stop and Shop is about 60,000 square feet. Once you break 40,000 square feet or really 25,000 square feet, you're considered a big box. But I think Darien does benefit from having the quote unquote big boxes, which are the, you know, Walmarts and Costco and Dick's Sporting Goods on the other side of the border. The road gets widened. They've planned their roads to be able to take that kind of traffic, and it's designed for that. Darien's roads were not like that. I mean, if you look at especially Good Wife Shopping Center, that is not on Route 1.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Norotan Heights Shopping Center is not on Route 1. The biggest store that we have today on Route 1 is the Darien Sports Shop, and that's grown organically over years and years and years, way before my time. I mean, the last renovation they had expansion has got to be over 20 years ago, or really 22 years ago, because it was done prior to me coming in town.
Mm-hmm. Stephen Olvaney is our guest today on Inside Town Hall. He is the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we're talking about that body's work. Let's take a hypothetical example of a proposed development and walk me through the process of P&Z's involvement. Let's pretend that I want to open a quick serve restaurant, and it's going to be called Cameron's Cupcake Castle. Okay. And I have found the perfect location on the Post Road. It's not a restaurant right now, but I think it would make a wonderful restaurant. And I've signed a lease with the owner of the building.
Okay.
And what do I do next? How do I make Cameron's Cupcake Castle a reality?
The way it really happens in town, since you signed the lease, and I've worked with a lot of landlords, most of the landlords in town do put the onus of getting the approvals on the tenant. So it's going to be you that comes into town hall. I would venture to guess prior to you signing the lease or acquiring the property, you've done your own research at the beginning that it's technically zoned or similarly zoned for what you want to do there. If it's zoned for office and you want to put retail in there, that's a bigger lift, so to speak. So the first thing that you'll do is you'll go into town hall and speak to the people at the desk. The beauty of town hall now, and also as time evolved in my career being in real estate, all of the permitted uses that are allowed in a particular zone are all online. Our zoning codes online. So for argument's sake, say you're in a DC zone, which is downtown commercial. You can look on there and say your cupcake store may be a permitted use. It may not be a permitted use based upon what's in the list of permitted uses. I can tell you that there is no cupcake store on the list of permitted uses. There might
Is that because it's cupcakes, or is that because it's a quick serve restaurant?
No, it's because we don't get into that level of detail.
So you don't care whether I'm selling cupcakes or sushi. If it's a food establishment, that's the thing you're worried about.
And for the most part, yes. We don't care if it's cupcake or sushi. The big item relative to restaurants or quick serve restaurants in our town is parking. So
yes.
For argument's sake, let's say you are not in the center of town where there's a parking regulation. And if you, for argument's sake, we'll also say that you're on the post road. Is that where you want to be? Is that where?
Oh, absolutely. I have the exact location in mind. It's actually it's a residence right now. It's a home.
Okay.
So that complicates it further, right?
It sure does. It sure does.
So I have to come to you and say, I want you to rezone this building, this block, this area to more than residential.
What we call it a text amendment change. So what we will do is inside the zoning that you may be in, and if you're in residential, we can say, okay. But inside residential, you have to add the use that you want to put in there into that zone. So you'll have to come in for a text amendment change. The first thing that you're going to do is lay out your property and your parking on there. Our parking requirement for that, I think it's one space for every 100 square feet. So it's 10 per 1,000, which is a lot of parking. You can say that, it's really not that big of a store. We only have 2 employees. We don't need that much parking. So that's going to be another exception. So our staff in P&Z is one of the best in the state. They also are, they're also the key word out there today is best practices. A lot of the other towns do call Jeremy and do call Fred in our town hall and said, how did you guys do it? And what do you guys do? So that being said, when you come in, staff is going to guide you in the right direction. And for the most part, you are going to have to come in front of the commission because there's a text amendment change. So you'll design your building, you'll design your parking. That's a thing. Sorry about that.
Just so our viewers know, you're not in Darien being buzzed by a plane. You're on vacation up in Rhode Island, right? Yeah.
That is exactly correct.
Okay.
So you'll come in with them. They will help you design your plan with your architect. And for argument's sake, architects and lawyers are really expensive. If you want to have a small shop, you probably, as Mr. Cameron, want to do a lot of it yourself. You can honestly even sketch out the floor plan of your restaurant on the inside with on the back of a napkin. That's what they called it in the old days. You're going to have to show how many seats you're going to want inside, which is quick service. The definition of quick service in our town is where you order off a menu board. So when you walk in above the cash register, against the cashier's head at the cash register, there's a menu board that says pink cupcakes, blue cupcakes. And if you want to have quick service, you can have tables inside. So we'll count the number of seats inside. We'll count the number of parking inside. We will ask you how many employees you have. We will ask you what hours of the day you'll have. And as part of the application process, which is now online, you can still do the paper application when you walk into town hall. And they can give you a paper document, which is 2-sided, 4 pages, and you can fill it out by hand, or you can fill it out on the online document.
You mentioned Jeremy, and I think we should give him his due. Jeremy Ginsburg. You see him a lot, and he's very involved in all the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. Who is Jeremy Ginsburg?
Jeremy is the Director of Land Use in the town of Darien. He's been a town employee. I'm going to say he's really not that old, but it's going to be about 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's around the same age as me, because when we talk a lot, we talk about our kids being in college. I think he's got a sophomore in college, and I've got a couple sophomores in college. And he came up through the ranks. Now he's one of the most respected land use or zoning people in the state of Connecticut. Most people in our area know him, and people that are not in our area know him. He has a staff of, I'm going to say, at least 10 people. There's 3 admins inside there. There is there's 2 or 3 admins inside the office. There's the environmental protection gentleman who just changed. There's Fred, the associate planner, that's changed. There is the zoning enforcement officer that's inside the office. And he also works directly with the other people across the hall, the Ed Gentiles of the world and the building office of the world. So he recently got a well-deserved promotion where he changed his title from I think planning zoning director to director of land use, because he does all encompassing. He is a great guy.
Steve Olvaney, our guest today on Inside Town Hall. He is the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we're talking about how a developer gets approved for a project. And we're using my hypothetical dream of opening Cameron's Cupcake Castle. What if I want to actually make the cupcakes in the store as opposed to bringing them in from some commercial kitchen? Does that complicate it further?
It sure does. Now you have to have a venting and hoods inside your building. Okay.
So my neighbors don't, but my neighbors love the smell of fresh cupcakes.
That's what everybody says. That's what the applicants always say. And then the neighbors come in a week later and go, we don't really like the smell of cupcakes. But after you get all your paperwork done, then you'll get put on the docket for a meeting in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're probably 3 weeks out of your first meeting. If all your paperwork is you're not going to get on the docket until all your paperwork is set. And when you submit it either online or in person, it gets reviewed by staff and they stamp it and they give it a date. So then you'll get on the docket. Then you have your 5 minutes of fame. You'll come in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. You'll explain yourself. A lot of people today come with a business plan, and it's just like any new little business. You'll say, I think I'm going to have served this many people, have this many employees. We don't concern ourselves with it that much, but it does matter. I want you to be successful. We don't get into any financials. If your rent is, for argument's sake, going extremes, $100 a square foot, you got to sell a lot of cupcakes. If your rent's $10 a square foot, you don't have to sell that many cupcakes. But people want to explain their business plan. If all your questions are answered and all of the commission's questions are answered, then we open it up to the general public, or actually our other town officials, and we open up to the general public. So that's when your neighbors can come in and say, I love the smell of cupcakes, and we'd love to have this store there. There's always going to be one person that may not like the store. And that's okay.
He doesn't have to eat my cupcakes, he can go someplace else. Let me complicate it further, because I want to change the exterior of my store to make it look like a castle. it's Cameron's Cupcake Castle, and I want to make it look like a castle. Do I need to talk to you? Do I need to go in front of the architecture review board? I mean, what do you care what the exterior of my store looks like?
I was just going to go to that next. We love the architecture review board. They're a group of some are professional architects, some are just concerned citizens, some are longtime residents, some are new residents. So because any commercial property has to go in front of the architecture review board, they may look at your plan right off and say it's fine. They may look at your plan, and for some reason, I think the front of your store is going to be pink. That's just what I think about cupcakes, is that they're pink. They may like your pink cupcake store facade, and they may not. They will ask you to change the color. They are an advisory board. They also want to know how big the cupcake is. I can tell you also, in our town, we have very strict sign regulations. If your cupcake is a logo, it can only be so big.
By cupcake, you mean the exterior of my store, not the actual cupcakes.
Yes.
They don't care if it's 5 ounces or 8 ounces, right?
No, they don't.
You mean the exterior of this giant cupcake I want to put on the front of my store.
Right. That's not going to fly.
And so can they nix my proposal? I mean, you say they don't have any power, but I have to go to see them before I come to planning and zoning.
You see them sometimes before planning and zoning, sometimes after. But as part of the planning and zoning process, they see everything that is commercial in our town.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make your cupcake a 12-inch cupcake on top of the castle, and our regulations were only 10, you're also going to have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and ask for an exception to the rule. The more things that you ask for and exceptions, the longer the time process comes.
And do I have to prove a hardship in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals? I've heard them use that phrase.
You're 100% correct. See, you're a very astute person.
I watch Channel 79, so I kind of know what's going on. I mean, how do I prove a hardship? Because you're not going to let me put up my cupcake. My cupcake logo is 12 inches instead of 10.
The hardship that you're going to have is if you only put up a 10-inch logo, you can't see it from the street.
Right.
Because there might be some detail in there, and it's integral to your business plan that we talked about earlier. So if the Zoning Board of Appeals believes you, then you might be okay. You still have to get a positive report for the most part by the Architecture Review Board. I can tell you that in our town, in my experience, in my knowledge, I don't think there's ever been a commercial project that has been developed in our town that's not received a positive report from the Architecture Review Board.
I think there was some controversy around Shake Shack and how big their burger was going to be, or how big the letters were going to be on the outside of their store. And I think they lost and you won, right? I mean, they wanted that store so badly.
They wanted that store so badly. They wanted a bigger neon sign of the burger on the top of the building. In our town, you're only really allowed to have 1 or 2 logos. And if you look at most Shake Shacks, and especially the one up in Westport, there's what they call a zipper strip sign. It wraps around the building. That's not permitted in our town. I think you can only have signs on 2 facades. So if you're on a corner, you get the front and you get a side. They had a lot, and it was integral to their business plan and their franchise and their branding, but it never got permitted in the town of Darien. So they did have to change. And
speaking of zipper, let's say I wanted to put one of those LED light displays on the outside of my store, and the letters would move by in different colors and say, special on cupcakes, $4.59 on Thursdays. Would you allow that, or is that an ARB thing again?
It's an ARB thing, but there's also 2 things. 1, if it's on the outside of the store, and 2, if it's on the inside of the store.
Mm-hmm.
If it's inside the store and it's inside the glass, that has 1 set of rules. If it's outside of the store on the outside of the building, it has a different set of rules. Sometimes, in all honesty, Jim, those do come to town after the fact, and that's the job of the zoning enforcement officer to enforce that. There are a couple in town which are, I'm going to say, going out towards the Norwalk border. And the zoning enforcement officer goes and stops those or asks them to change it.
I mean, if I had my store and I decided to put one of those up because the cupcakes weren't selling, after I'd been approved and open, somebody would come and have a little chat with me.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
The one thing I can tell you that's a little bit odd about our town too is, for argument's sake, say you get a letter from the zoning enforcement officer that says you have to take your sign down and you don't take it down. We really only have one mechanism to do that, which is, I think, cease and desist, which is a letter you'll get in the mail, but there's no fining aspect to our town. I've actually wanted to institute something like that. And I know we're going a little bit off topic, but we can't fine you $10 a day for having your zipper sign. There's no mechanism there. And I think we looked into it once or twice. I think the state of Connecticut really frowns against that too.
Mm-hmm. Steve Olvaney, chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, our guest today on Inside Town Hall. I'm obviously inside Town Hall. He's sitting on his porch up in Rhode Island enjoying summer vacation. We're recording this in mid-August. And we're talking about my hypothetical dream of opening Cameron's Cupcake Castle. And I've gone through the, let's say, approval process in front of the Architecture Review Board, which didn't like my idea of turning a giant cupcake on the outside of the building into its architectural statement, like something on Route 66 in the 50s or something. So I've kind of scaled that back. I don't have any zipper signs. I've decided I don't want to put my cupcake kitchen in Cameron's Cupcake Castle. I'm going to cook them off-site, bring them in fresh, piping hot. And now I'm in front of you. I've made my presentation. The public has had a chance to comment on it. What do you guys on Planning and Zoning Commission do next?
Next, there's another 2-meeting process. The next meeting that we have, when you're on the docket again, we will debate your application, the merits of the application. And at the end of the day, I bet you that we're going to approve it. So you're going to get, we will instruct the staff to draft an approval resolution for your cupcake castle. Your zoning text amendment, because you're in a residential zone, would probably also get approved. So in that district, we'll say that you're allowed to make sell cupcakes out of this former house. Over the next week or the next 2 weeks, depending on when the next meeting is, staff will draft up that resolution. Then the resolution in draft form will come in front of the commission. We will read it and review it. We get all the draft resolutions. We're a little bit old school too. We're old school and modern school. You get a quote unquote packet of the draft resolution dropped off your house on Thursday afternoon. It used to be Fridays, but now town hall's closed. So all the commissioners get to review it on paper over the weekend. You'll also get it emailed to you, or I'll get it emailed to me and I can read it online. Mm-hmm. So then Tuesday, when we get to our meeting, everybody will have read it already, have their typos, have their corrections, have their comments, and then we will review the draft document. If there's a typo in it, if there's a change or anything that's minor in nature, we can fix it on the fly. If we like how the draft resolution is written, it gets approved as written. If there's something we want to add to it, where at the last minute, you said that you may want to have a drive-through lane, but you're not thinking about that today, we may add in a sentence or take out a paragraph that says, allow them to put in a drive-through after a period of time if they so want it. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, we may have it send it back to staff to do a redraft. Or if it's simple enough, we can just add it in there. So then that night at that meeting, when we vote on your resolution, you're good to go, and you get a vote of a unanimous vote or a majority vote. You're good to go to your building department the next day and file for your building permit.
Let me back up slightly, because we were talking about the public hearing. How do, aside from following TV 79, how do members of the public know that I want to put Cameron's Cupcake Castle up on the Post Road? Do I have to notify my neighbors? Do you publicize this? I mean, sometimes the public feels, well, no one ever told me that this was going to happen.
In most instances, all it's called in our business called the butters. Everyone that abuts your property or is within a butter within, it's probably in most cases in your instance, it's going to be 100 feet. You will get a notice in the mail that says an application's been filed for an abutting property or someone that's within 100 feet. And some regulations, it may be further than that, and we have a larger diameter where you go out and all your neighbors will be notified. As per state law, your application is also going to be in the legal notices in a generally widely publicized publication in the area, which is for our town is the Darien Times. If you look in the Darien Times every week, there is a spot in there that says public notices, and it'll say, there's an application, it's got a file number, it has an address, it has a person on what you want to do there. So it's on the agenda of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is also posted generally on Wednesday of the week prior. And so there's about 6 days there. So there's a lot of different boards that do follow the agenda.
Mhm.
And the other thing that we do that I instituted as a chairman a while ago is on the bottom of our agenda, it says what are the dates of the next meetings. So in the next meetings, we'll have one, for argument's sake, it's September 5th or September 6th. At the end of the prior meeting, which is going to be in July or whatever the other date was, we'll say, Jeremy, what's on the agenda for the next meeting?
Mhm.
We'll say, oh, we're going to see Cameron's Cupcake Castle come through. It's a nice gentleman that wants to open a small store on the Post Road in a fantastic location.
Fantastic. And we all love cupcakes, or we should love cupcakes
That's for
if you're
sure.
any kind of an American. So let's say that for whatever reason, the Planning and Zoning Commission rejects my application. What's my recourse? What can I do?
There's two things. First thing that's easy is you can resubmit a new application based upon the recommendations that we or staff gave to you, or you have the ability to appeal it. If you appeal it, that is something you can do statutory. The filing fee in I don't know if it's state court or whatever courts they call it. I know the courts in Stanford, it's about a $250 filing fee. And you can file to appeal the resolution. Lately, ironically, we've approved a lot of resolutions that have been appealed, either by the applicant or by the neighbor or by a neighbor on something that was approved. That's your statutory thing. I can tell you, in most parts, staff is very, very good. Before they submit an application to the Planning and Zoning Commission, they will tell you as the applicant in advance, these are the heavy items that the commission's going to focus on. So if you want to get approved sooner than later, that they would adjust that. If something came up in the public hearing that was quote unquote controversial, then the public hearing would probably be extended for a week's time, where we'd say, Mr. Cameron, you have 10 seats inside. We really think you should scale it back to 8 seats inside.
Mm-hmm.
And you could either say yes or no. And even at the public hearing, you could say that's fine, and you can change it on the fly. But you always have a statutory appeal right as per state regulations. And you also have your own appeal right that you can submit a different application and slightly tweak it a little bit where the items that were not there.
And when I start this application process, what does it cost me as an entrepreneur to file the application and get staff involved, et cetera?
All those fees are very transparent up front. I think in total, it's about $100 for one fee. Then there's another fee. If it's a special permit item, I think that is a $250 fee. So in total, the fees for filing is about $400. That's pretty much the high end maximum that we have in our town. As a restaurant, you're also going to have to get a health department fee. And then there's the building permit, which is a percentage of the cost that you're putting into the building.
And those fees are designed to cover the cost of town employees reviewing everything, right?
Pretty much just administrative fees, yeah. And there are fees across the state are pretty low. I think in my time in the commission, which is 9 years, I think we've adjusted them once.
Right.
You know,
So let's say Cameron's Cupcake Castle has been approved as amended. I've shrunk the size of my cupcake on the outside of the building. I've given concession on 8 seats instead of 10. People eat cupcakes quickly. They get in, they get out. No drive-through lane, nothing controversial there. I'm good to go. I go down to the building department. I get my permit, and then I run into money problems.
okay.
I don't have my funding, and I can't start the project. And my store, even though I'm paying rent because I want to keep this valuable piece of real estate, it's just sitting there empty. And the grass is growing up on the outside of it, and the shutter on the outside of the building is starting to fall off. It's looking pretty nasty. Who's responsible for that? I mean, can you go back and say, whoa, you got to get this project going here, Mr. Cameron, or we're going to, disapprove it. Once it's approved, is it always approved?
Once it's approvals do have an expiration date. So most approvals, if they don't get started on the last page of your approval, it says you have to pull the building permit, or you have to start the project in earnest and complete the project in earnest at a certain time frame. But I can tell you that in most cases, yours was a little bit different because you were the tenant. In most cases, we're going to write a letter to the landlord because the landlord's still in charge. It's their property. Relative to the landlord, he might have statutorily put the maintenance of the project on the tenant. So it's really the landlord's problem to go chase you down as the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I can tell you that in our town, we do not have a commercial blight law. We have a residential blight law. So if there is a blighted commercial project in town, that's commercial, and there are a couple of them, and there's one on the Post Road that's way out by Norwalk, that we don't have any mechanisms to find those people or charge those people or ask them to fix up their property. That's something, we are going to try to look into because it is a concern in town. Like I said earlier, I've been in the real estate business for a while. I've been in Stanford, overlooked a thing called the Hole in the Ground. It was there for years.
I know. Downtown.
I was also my office was at 1166 Avenue of the Americas. They started a building across the street called 1177 Avenue Americas. They stopped after the 5th floor. And it's a 40-story tower. And it sat there like a rusted jungle gym for years.
Right.
It happens around the country. It's very, very difficult to rectify because there are a lot of land use protections for the person that owns the land.
And that's probably the case with the Palmer's development at Neuroden Heights, across from the Neuroden Heights train station, which has sat empty, undemolished, looking pretty nasty for a couple of years now, right?
Yes, in our last resolution that we wrote for them, it was very detailed and specific that they had to wrap it in screening, that's the green screens you see on the outside. At one point in time, it's wrapped on 2 sides on the screening, which is the Hollow Tree Ridge Road side, and then the Heights Road side. It doesn't wrap around all the way inside the property. When that approval was done, after they got the approval, they did not wrap it in screening immediately. So they got a letter from Town Hall. It was signed by me that said, congratulations on your approval. As part of the approval process, you have to do this immediately. And they fix it for the most part immediately. It still does not look great. In our resolution, there is no demolition time frame in there. There is a time frame where if they don't start the project, the approvals will expire. Well, I tell you that approval is probably, that time frame is probably 2 years.
Has that time frame passed? It must have been at least 2 years, or not since your last approval
Yeah,
of the Goddard School, I guess, right?
they're on their third approval. Yeah,
They are.
yeah.
Okay.
The first one had a corner store at the corner of Hollow Tree and Heights Road. I always called that the Starbucks location. Then they did some engineering, and then it was too deep, too hard to build underground there, so they made that parking. Then that plan stopped, and then they switched it again with the Goddard School on that corner.
How do we know that these traffic studies, which have to be done by a developer, are accurate? Who pays for the traffic study, and how do we know that it's objective?
It's two things. There's always an initial traffic study that's done by the applicant. That's part of the special permit process. Traffic studies cost, for a round figure number, it costs the applicant about somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to get a professional traffic study done by a traffic engineer. There's a number of reputable firms out there that are in that business. Then also, and that's paid by the applicant. Then the town hires.
Do they choose the traffic study person too?
Yes.
Well, how do we know that they're not going to tell them what they want to be told, that the traffic study is okay?
This is where our piece comes in. The town then hires another traffic study person that works for the town. The catch is that person is paid for by the applicant. So it's called a peer review process. We have our own person on our side that's working for the town, that's being paid by the applicant to review the third-party traffic study. It's kind of sort of like two lawyers working out a process, and because they talk the same language. They're both professionals. They're both in the business. Most times, each one knows of the other company or firm, and they will go over the study. For the most part, our traffic peer review person is a gentleman named Michael Galante. He's been working for the town, I'm going to say, for over 25 years. He actually, it's longer than that. And I'll show you I want to show this to you one day. His old company was called Clark and Associates. David Genovese, I'll give him the credits too. He found a traffic study for downtown Darien that was done in the 1950s. That was done by Clark Associates.
Wow.
And he's still working for the town today. So he will review the other third-party person. They'll go over together. Both traffic studies will come to the initial traffic study by the applicant will come to the commission. They're complicated technical documents to read, but you can read it over the weekend and then be able to come back on Tuesday when it's going to be presented by the professional with cogent questions and concerns. So you as an applicant can question the person that drafted the document. And then also, after the applicant's traffic study person usually talks, then Michael Galante will also review it. A lot of times those go back twice. I'll give you a couple quick examples. With regard to the federal project, and even going back in time with regards to Avalon. I'm not sure if you lived in town in Avalon. I think you've lived in town.
Yes, I did.
When I first moved into town, at the corner of Hollow Tree and West were stop signs. There was no traffic light there. When Avalon wanted to build their project, they proposed and had to put in the light that's there, the light at the entrance to Avalon. It also goes into the train station. They paid for all of that. Flipping to today's world in Federal, over on Norotan Avenue, there's a series of traffic lights which starts at the gas stations and goes all the way down to the intersection where Post 53 is, and even the next one where Jake's Diner is. Is that Jake's Diner? No, it's even further down.
Further down Maple, I think.
Yeah, where you turn on to Hecker.
Yeah,
so I think that's Hecker there.
Yeah.
All those lights were in different systems. They were not timed the same. As part of the traffic study review, the consultants came up, said to make traffic better here, all these lights should be timed together and should be connected either electronically or physically by wires. all that work is being paid for by federal. So that's the study is. The last piece I'll give to you, I will say every single time, whether I'm chairman or in a regular person seat, I'll say, Michael Galante, are you sure this is going to work? Because if not, it's your reputation. And there's a lot of other consultants out there, and he's not been wrong, to my knowledge, ever yet.
That was going to be my question. Have we ever found that a traffic study did not anticipate traffic?
For the most
and it
part,
was worse than they said it was going to be.
not after it was built.
Yeah.
Not after it was built.
Is it my perception, or I'm just getting old? I know, but are there not more cars on the streets in Darien right now? I mean, parking in front of houses. I mean, I get the sense there's just more traffic.
There is more traffic, and the thing that drove me kind of crazy is you got to remember we did some of these big projects, and I call them the big three during various times. Also, the other one that was in there too that was a big traffic problem was when we had this 7-Eleven application come in. All the traffic consultants said, well, this is a different year. It's because of COVID, and the traffic studies aren't right. There's another argument on the other side where people are saying that parking is going to be less of a requirement because of driverless cars and Ubers and taxis. So on the Corbin District project, their parking requirement, they wanted a lot of parking, but one of their parking facilities that they're going to build there, if parking is not a requirement, because instead of you having your own car, you use Uber all the time and you have less parking, it's going to go down. I've seen the argument on both sides.
Right.
New York City is obviously doing, if you read the papers or you listen to the news, they're doing congestion traffic controls and pricing in New York City because there is more traffic.
Right.
I can tell you that everybody knows in every neighborhood, there are more Amazon trucks, there are more UPS, more FedEx trucks.
Mm-hmm.
From a planning zoning commission perspective, we account for that.
Steve Olvaney is the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we're talking about the work of that body on inside town hall. COVID has changed a lot. I know that the federal development, the other development that's growing gangbusters up at Narodin Heights, came before you to change a couple of the offices to, instead of have one tenant, maybe it'll be 2 or 3 tenants. So it could be a lawyer and a consultant and a hypnotist. I don't know, something like that. But we see people sharing offices. We see more people working from home. The concept of transit-oriented development, putting big development near the train stations. I follow transportation. Has been the operative phrase in Hartford for a number of years, but I'm wondering if ridership does not come back on Metro North, and it's still only about 60% at best, what's going to be the future of transit-oriented development if people aren't taking transit? If we're working from home more often, we're only going into the city once or twice a week instead of 5 times a week.
That's actually a great question. And I've thought about
Thank
that
you.
a lot, of course. But I think people still want to be in an active area. So in that, especially in the federal project, there's 116 apartments going in there.
Mm-hmm.
I call it, and I don't know if it was my word or somebody else's word, what they're trying to create there is an ecosystem where you have restaurants and you have offices and you have apartments, mixed use, whether it's transit orientated or it's not transit orientated, is the way of zoning today.
So you don't need to leave that estate, so to speak.
Correct.
Everything you would need, you can go to Palmer's, you can go to restaurants, you can go get a massage, you can work out. You don't need a car. You're not going to get in your car and drive around.
Yep. You also
Right.
can have a dentist's office in there. You can also have an urgent care office in there.
Right.
You can also have your insurance guy in there and your lawyer person in there. That's the way they're designed. And that's the way the world's going today. The beauty of what I do is a big part of my commercial real estate business is new development. So I get to travel all over the area, and I told you my region earlier, and I see all these new projects. They
Mhm.
built one very similar in the town of Chappaqua. It's actually the hamlet of Chappaqua, which is a very, very tiny town in Westchester County. All that stuff is there. There's like an LA Fitness. There is a Whole Foods. There's an urgent care. There's a dentist store. There's a Starbucks. And there's a whole bunch of apartments that are being built by Toll Brothers. I've seen those 3 years ago when they first started. That one actually started 10 years ago, and now it's finished. And my firm actually just sold it. So I've seen how they work. Chappaqua does not have a train station. It's not
Mhm.
anywhere near a train station.
Mhm.
But I can tell you that people do like, and especially in our town, the ability to be near a train station, so you can go to the city for a show, so you can
Right.
go in for dinner and you can come back out. There's a lot of guys in Greenwich, they're like that. They're building apartments at a train station in Greenwich all the time. And there's offices in Greenwich that are by the train station, because where we live, in the beauty of where we live, let's say your client is from New Jersey and he has a meeting, an office in the city, you could be in Darien and say, okay, I'll meet you for lunch at 12:30, near Grand Central. You could leave your office in Darien at 11 o'clock and make it for lunch and be back at your office at 3 o'clock.
Mhm.
you
Or
know?
you could just fire up Zoom and never leave your office at all, right?
But I mean, I like to have lunch and eat people, and your client's from Princeton, but you meet in the
Oh,
middle in the city.
okay. Okay. It looks like it's starting to rain where you are, so I don't want to keep you much longer. Let me just ask one other big question I've actually seen posed on social media, and that is Darien overdeveloped? When is enough?
That's a great question. I think that we've been overdeveloped for years. Okay. It's 98% developed in the first place. So is Manhattan, but there's cranes all over Manhattan. What I look at is it's called suburban renewal versus urban renewal.
Hmm.
There are some places that need to be developed. It comes down to density. I do not want to raise the density of Darien more than it is today, or more than it has to be, because relative to density, you're going to need more schools. You're going to need more places for people to go. You're going to need more park space, more land space. The other thing that I do not want to do is see some of the, what I will call starter homes in town, see some of those neighborhoods get changed to non-starter home neighborhoods. When my in-laws and my in-laws' parents came here years ago, they all settled in the neighborhood of West Avenue and Hollow Tree Ridge Road, and also on the south side of there. That's all 1/5 acre zoning.
Mhm.
Those are starter homes today. Yes, they're priced at $650,000, which is a lot of money. Being that the median price in Darien is about $1,650,000. Those homes need to be updated and preserved, and not knocked down and joined and put together. But in that aspect, some of those houses are 2-bedroom houses. Some of them are 3-bedroom houses. I personally have 4 kids. We would love to live in a 5-bedroom house. But that creates more rooms. But back in the old days, I grew up with 7 kids in my family. Six of them all shared beds, all bedrooms. It's not like that today.
Right.
But I think right now where we want to be is kind of sort of in a little bit of a wait and see holding pattern. There's some developers that have called recently and said, hey, I'm looking at this piece of property. It was going to be Cameron's Cupcakes, but I want to build 20 apartments there. What do you think about that? And Town Hall and others have discouraged them. I don't think we need that right now. There's something else that can go there.
Well, that's why we need Cameron's Cupcake Castle on the Post Road. And I'm so glad that the commission approved it. And I'll look forward to inviting you to the opening ribbon cutting ceremony. There's so much we want to keep discussing, but we're running out of time, and you're getting damp sitting in the rain outside. You've been very generous with your time. Steve Olvaney, the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, joining us today on Inside Town Hall. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate your time and explaining the work of your commission.
Thanks for the invitation, Jim. I appreciate it. Anytime.
Okay, we'll get you back. And thank you for watching another edition of Inside Town Hall.